Today we're going to hear a story about the miraculous feeding of a multitude. Now it's a story most of us have heard before. It shows up 6 times in the Gospels. So let me read to you the account we find in Mark chapter 6. The disciples gathered around Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. Early in the chapter, Jesus sends out the 12 disciples. They proclaim the good news, at which they do mightily. Right? So they've gathered back together. And Jesus said to them, "Come away to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest for a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. So they went away in a boat to a deserted place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they hurried there on foot from all the towns and arrived ahead of them. As he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them, for they were like sheep without a shepherd. He began to teach them many things. When it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place. The hour is now very late. Send them away so they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy something for them to eat." Jesus answered them, "You give them something to eat." They said to him, "Are we to go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat?" 200 denarii is about $20,000. Right? That's what they estimated it would cost to feed the multitude. Right? Jesus said to them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." And when they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. He ordered them to get all the people to sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and 50s, and taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, he blessed, he broke the loaves, and gave them to his disciples to set before the people, and divided the 2 fish among them all. And all ate and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and fish. And those who had eaten the loaves numbered 5,000 men. All right, this is one of the few stories that we find in all 4 Gospels. That tells me it's significant. But what is its significance of it? Why did all the Gospels said this is a story that needs to be told? I think we need to, first of all, think about what's the purpose of a miracle. Why did Jesus do miracles at all in the first place? The purpose, not as many presume, was not to somehow prove that he was God, right? A lot of times we think, well, if I had superpowers, I would use my superpowers to prove to people who I was. That's not what Jesus does with his miracles. If he was trying to impress or wow the crowds, it wouldn't make sense for him to turn around and tell the crowds, "Now don't tell anyone about this," right? Which oftentimes he did. Rather, what I believe the purpose of the miracles was to show us something about the character of God. If we want to understand, Jesus was redefining how we think about who God is. And the miracles give us those cues, give us those glimpses into the character of God. And what we see in this is that God is about compassion. Right? We hear it right in the text. Jesus looked at the crowds and he had compassion on them. Now, if you noticed in the story, it happens before they got hungry, right? Early on, when he sees the people, he says he has compassion long before their stomachs started to growl. His compassion for them was because they were like sheep without a shepherd. Right? They were looking for direction. They were looking for meaning. They were looking for a reason, to be. And so he begins to teach them about God. The hunger thing comes as the teaching goes on and on and on, all right? Which then Jesus turns into a learning opportunity to learn something about the character of God as well. First of all, he says God is trustworthy. They were in a deserted place without resources. And he says this is like our ancestors in the wilderness, right? They had nothing to eat. And God provided for them miraculous bread, manna. The reason for giving manna was to help them learn how to trust, to learn that God was trustworthy. And they would not make this just on their own efforts, but on a God who would be there for them. The issue is not simply a lack of food, right? If the issue is a lack of food and you already are able to break the laws of physics, why just not make all food self-reproducing then, so no one would ever be hungry again? If you're going to do a miracle, why not just say, all right, from now on, no one ever gets to be hungry? But that wasn't the point. It wasn't a lack of food. The thing with hunger back then, just as it is now, it's not it's not just about there's not being enough food. The issue is that of distribution. Even when there's famine in the world, there's more than enough food in the world. The trouble is getting it to the people who need it. It's a distribution. It's an access problem when people are hungry, whether we're in Malawi or Wisconsin. It's about getting access to the food that is there. Famine, when we find it in Malawi, is oftentimes blamed on the weather. But it's more directly the result of policies that people have made. Back in the 60s, big agribusiness came in, and they changed the country. Instead of growing the things they've grown for 5,000 years, they switched to monocropping hybrid corn with dependence on chemicals to make it grow. We created a dependency, and when the crop fails, then there is no food, or the food is not available to them. The policies enrich the wealthy, but at the expense of the poor. You've heard me talk about permaculture before. And it was when we went to Malawi, Diane and I got to see that firsthand. It was just an amazing kind of thing. To live in a place where you can farm or garden year-round, 12 months a year, with hundreds and hundreds of edible, drought-resistant already are growing there. There's really not a reason for famine other than the ones that we have created. Well, when the disciples announced to Jesus that he needs to disperse the crowds, Jesus says, there's no need to do that, right? He instructs the disciples to handle it, to do something, other than make excuses why it would be too expensive to help, right? It begins with us believing that we can do something. When we see a problem that seems insurmountable, it begins by believing we can do something, and then seeking the resources that we do have, the resources that are there. And when God blesses those efforts, the impossible becomes possible. When compassion rises above self-interest and greed, miracles happen. While I was teaching at the Pastor's Academy, Diane got to sneak out one day and got to see firsthand the amazing work of the Evangelical Lutheran Church Development Service, addressing some of the core issues of hunger there. Now, the Development Service was created about 20 years ago in response to refugees who were crowding the borders of Malawi. Even though Malawi was one of the poorest countries in the world, there was all kinds of fighting, violence going on in Mozambique, and refugees were flooding across the borders, and the Malawians said we need to help them. So they created this development service. Now, as after the crisis passed, they said there's plenty of work we need to be doing here, and so it expanded to address a number of issues that are all get to be interrelated: the access to good water, food security, literacy, reforestation, crop diversification, sanitation. Lots of different things. Now, Diane, I'll let you come up. Instead of me telling you what Diane experienced, let me just let Diane tell you what she experienced as she was able to see firsthand what was going on there.
Okay, I had the privilege of visiting one of the feeding centers in Matsembe with a woman named Judith, who works for the Evangelical Lutheran Development Center. The feeding center is located at the Lutheran Church, and they target for this feeding center orphans, children 5 and under, and vulnerable populations. The children are served an enriched porridge, and each day, 2 women are chosen to learn how to properly prepare and cook the porridge. And there's so much more, though, to these feeding centers than just food. While the women and children are waiting for the food, the time is used to teach. Many of the women can't read, so they teach them through songs to help them remember what they've been taught. And they cover all kinds of things, everything from good hygiene with food preparation and hand washing, HIV/AIDS, malaria, family planning. And while the women are learning, they work with the children on their ABCs and numbers and other preschool activities. Located next to the church.
You want to show a little clip of that, the song
yes,
doing that?
yeah.
All right.
Fun way to learn, huh? Okay, located next to the church is one of the water towers and also a faucet so that the feeding center has clean water for cooking, drinking, and washing. And then a young engineer named John showed me 3 different water towers and wells that have been built throughout this village. Judith shared with me that in her lifetime, she has seen the effects of global warming and deforestation in Malawi. The wells that they dig now have to go down 50 to 60 meters to get fresh water. Each well has a solar-powered submersible pump to move the water up the towers, and then from the towers there's several faucets that branch off to the community. Clean water is a huge, huge issue. Women are delegated the task of getting water, and they would have to walk hours to get the water and carry it on their heads. And even after that, it may or may not be clean. So having these water taps right there in their village means that they can spend their time caring for their families with clean water for drinking, cooking, cleaning, and irrigating their gardens. Another part of this ministry, too, is teaching the women how to grow their own, they call them kitchen gardens. And with this, they can feed their family, and any extra can be sold. Judith also showed me another large parcel of land that had just been tilled by hand by some of the men in the village. And this land will be divided up, and they will teach the women good agricultural practices and how to use drip irrigation, which is now possible because of the wells. The food they raise can be sold, and they're taught about saving money. They're also taught how to run a small business, and there is a lending and savings group set up to help them. I mentioned earlier that Malawi has been deforested, and part of the reason of this has happened because the homes are made from mud bricks, and the bricks have to be stacked and then fired to make them hard. This takes a lot of wood to accomplish. So the church now has a brick making machine that doesn't require firing, and it combines cement and mud to make a really hard brick. The community is encouraged to use it. I didn't get to see the machine actually in action, but I saw 2 big stacks of the bricks. One is going to be used for a new kitchen for the feeding center, and one will be for an education center. And this center will be for teen mothers who had to drop out of school. They'll provide childcare while they receive education and learn new skills to be able to help support themselves. Another improvement that is still being worked on is a new stove design. It requires much less fuel and will hold at least 2 cooking pots. And they hope to have this new stove when they move into their new kitchen for the feeding center. A lot of burning happens in Malawi with garbage and cooking fires, so air pollution is a problem. Next to the field that was prepared for planting crops, they've also planted an area of trees in order to start helping the air quality and bring more trees back to Malawi. I know Steve has said thank you for both of us, but I too want to say thank you.
All right, time for another Chichewa lesson, right? You were saying, oh, good, I want to learn some more. I want to teach you a table grace that we use before most of our meals there. So in English, the prayer is, Our Heavenly Father, bless this meal. Give to all those who are in need your spirit and body. Now you already know the tune. It was set to a tune that we're already familiar with. So we'll give us a try. Again, it's all phonetic and it's consistent, unlike English. And so once you learn what the vowels are, you can just give it a try. So we'll see if we can do this. So like tate wahu wakum wamba. All right, does that make sense? Tate wahu wakum wamba dalitsa ni chakud yachi pasa niso oisowa cha imu di chatupi. All right, easy, right? Took us about 2 weeks before we could sing in Chichewa when we were there. You get 30 seconds, all right. It goes like this. Tate watu wakum wamba dalitsani chakuyachi pasaninso sosowa chauzimu di chadu. Try it again. Tate watu wakum wamba dalitsani chakuyachi patsaninso ohichowa chauzimu di chadu.